Welcome to chapter 13. This is the endocrine system. This is an overview of the endocrine system. This PowerPoint only consists of 23 PowerPoints, 23 pages. So you will need to know everything on this entire PowerPoint because it's condensed. All right. So let's get into it. All right. So the endocrine system is very similar to the nervous system in that it is one of the two main systems that helps cells throughout the body communicate with one another. So regardless of whether you're talking about a cell on your eyelid and the tip of your big toe, those two cells are able to communicate with one another through the actions of the endocrine system as well as the nervous system. The nervous system will release neurotransmitters. So the chemical that the nervous system uses is neurotransmitters. The endocrine system uses hormones that are released into the bloodstream. So, neurotransmitters released at synapses between presynaptic neurons and some other cell, whether it's a neuron or an effector. And endocrine system releases hormones directly into the bloodstream. Some of the hormones will act briefly, while others are long lasting. So you have a variety of functions of the hormones that are being released by the endocrine system. Some are short, some are very long acting. Some of the actions caused by these endocrine or hormones are subtle. So they don't pack a punch. They're functioning and it's like in the background, you don't notice a big change, while others have a great and dramatic effect on the body. Some of the general characteristics of the endocrine system. So endocrine, endo is internal, crine means secretion. So the endocrine system is internal secretions. The reason why it's considered internal secretion is because these secretions are being secreted into the internal environment. The internal environment that it uses is the bloodstream. All right. So what it is secreting is hormones directly into the internal environment via the bloodstream. The hormones that are secreted by the endocrine system act on what we call target cells. Target cells are cells that are not close. They're far away cells that have receptors that receive the signal of that particular hormone. All right. So target cells are on distant cells that act on certain hormones being released by the organs of the endocrine system. Endocrine system is made up of cells, tissues, and organs called endocrine glands. Endocrine glands do not have a duct. They use the bloodstream and they secrete hormones. The opposite of that, or the alternate to that, is exocrine glands. We encountered exocrine glands when we were talking about the integumentary system. The exocrine glands, if you remember, are those glands that uses ducts to secrete to a surface. So your sweat glands are an exocrine gland. Exo meaning external, crine meaning secretion. So it's an external secretion, and the sweat glands secrete sweat directly to the skin surface. The let's say the digestive enzymes uses a duct to secrete those enzymes directly onto the surface of the stomach, the small intestines. So uses a duct to secrete to a surface, which is different from the endocrine glands, which is why it says that it's ductless. So endocrine glands do not use a duct, and they use the bloodstream as opposed to secreting onto a surface. And the product that it secretes is called a hormone. So that's the difference between and the endocrine and exocrine secretions. So this is basically what I was talking about. So exocrine secretions secreted externally onto a surface by the use of a duct. So exocrine is secreted directly to a specific surface. So again, sweat is secreted onto the skin. Your enzymes are secreted into the stomach or into the small intestines. Mucus secreted directly onto the surface of digestive system, respiratory system, etc. Those are exocrine glands secreting their surface directly to a surface using a duct. All right, so here are images that show you examples of what we're talking about. The thyroid gland, so it says gland, is an endocrine gland because it has lots and lots of blood vessels associated with the organ. And when these cells secrete their hormone, those hormones diffuse from the extracellular space directly into the bloodstream so that the bloodstream carries that hormone away onto to the surface of some distant cell so that then that distant cell can act on the functioning of that hormone being produced by that gland. Whereas with the skin, with the integumentary system, the sweat gland is secreting into a duct that will lead that product, in this case, it's sweat, directly onto a surface. This is exocrine. So we talked about endocrine glands, we talked about exocrine glands. There are two other types of glands in the body. You have paracrine and autocrine glands. These are sort of like endocrine glands. So quasi means something like, make sure you look it up. But the way I describe it is something like an endocrine gland. So paracrine gland. Para means next to. So secretion, crine means secretion. So paracrine secretions enter the interstitial fluid. Make sure that you know what interstitial fluid is, but only affect nearby cells. So para, next to or nearby. It secretes its secretions into that interstitial space around those cells and only affect other cells that are near where it was secreted. Autocrine secretions only affect the cell that secreted that substance. So auto, self. So it secretes secretions that are going to affect itself, whereas paracrine secretes its secretions in the space around it and affects cells that are nearby. So now we have exocrine, endocrine, paracrine, and autocrine. So let's compare the nervous system and the endocrine system. Remember, we said that these were two systems of the body that help cells communicate with one another. So both of these communicate using some type of chemical that will bind to a receptor on a cell membrane or in a cell. Some part of a cell will have the receptor that receives the signal from the chemicals that these cells produce. The nervous system releases neurotransmitters in the synapse, and that will affect the postsynaptic cell. Whereas your glands, the endocrine glands specifically, will release hormones into the bloodstream, and only the target cells will respond to that particular hormone because target cells will have receptors specific for that hormone being released by that gland. You'll see here that it says hormones have no effect on other cells. That's because if it's not a target cell, then other cells won't have a receptor for that particular hormone. So that hormone will have no effect on that cell because that cell has no way to receive the signal for that hormone. Your major endocrine glands are listed here. Yes, you need to know all of the major endocrine glands. So hypothalamus, we already talked about that in the brain. We talked about how the hypothalamus helps the nervous system functions. The hypothalamus is considered an endocrine gland. You have the pineal gland. Some people call this the third eye. So you may have heard people talk about the third eye. That is the pineal gland. You have the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is called the master gland because the pituitary gland secretes hormones that will, in essence, affect all or most of the other major endocrine glands. You have the thyroid gland that is in the neck, that is a major gland that controls cellular metabolism. Parathyroid gland. Remember, I said that para means next to or near. So the parathyroid gland is a little gland that's, well, actually, it's four little glands on the posterior side of the thyroid. They are two completely different organs, but the parathyroid gland is actually physically connected to the thyroid gland. So you see these four little dots on the back side of the thyroid gland. Those are the parathyroid glands. Again, completely different organs, just attached to the thyroid gland. Then you have the thymus, that is near the sternum. You have the adrenal gland, adding in addition. Renal means kidney. So adrenal gland is the gland that sits on top of the kidneys. The kidneys also have some endocrine function. You have the pancreas that has both endocrine and exocrine function. You have in people born female, you have the ovaries that secrete your female sex hormones. You have in people born male, the testes that secrete male sex hormones. So please recognize all of these as major endocrine organs. So hormones, again, hormones are the chemicals that are secreted by your endocrine glands. Your hormones can be made up or classified as steroid hormones or steroid-like hormones, or they can be non-steroid hormones. Your steroid hormones and your steroid-like hormones are made from a cholesterol backbone. So I know that we always hear that cholesterol is bad. We don't want cholesterol. We don't want to eat cholesterol. We don't want to make cholesterol. We don't want high cholesterol levels. Cholesterol is bad. That's not 100% correct. Cholesterol excess is bad, especially when that excess cholesterol is floating around in your bloodstream. And then it can get caught, it can get stuck. Basically, excess cholesterol has the potential to become plaques in the vessels that will then build on each other and eventually can block the blood flow of a particular vessel. But cholesterol in and of itself is not bad. Cholesterol, one of the functions of cholesterol is to make your steroid hormones. And you need steroid hormones. You actually love your steroid hormones because your sex hormones are made from a cholesterol backbone. So your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone, and every person, whether they're born female or male, has all three hormones. We just have a differing amount of these hormones because of our genetic makeup. Your adrenal cortex hormones are also made of cholesterol backbone. All right. So steroid hormones are your sex hormones and your adrenal cortex hormones. Every other hormone is considered a non-steroid hormone. These are not made from cholesterol. Cholesterol is a type of lipid. It's a type of fat. So steroid hormones are made up of lipids, cholesterol specifically. Your non-steroid hormones are made up of things like amino acids, or proteins and carbohydrates. So remember, amino acids are the breakdown products of proteins. So non-steroid hormones are either made up of amino acids, which are the individual building blocks of proteins, or it's made up of proteins and carbohydrates. So some examples of these non-steroid hormones are amines. So your epinephrine, norepinephrine are made up of amino acids. Specifically, tyrosine is a type of amino acid that makes up your epinephrine and norepinephrine. Remember that epinephrine is adrenaline, norepinephrine is noradrenaline. Protein-based hormones are hormones like growth hormone. We talked about growth hormone when we talked about the skeletal system, and we talked about how if a person has an excess of growth hormone, they can develop gigantism. If they have too little growth hormone while they're developing, they could develop dwarfism. So we've had experience with protein based hormones, growth hormone. Peptide hormone is like your thyroid releasing hormone, TRH, which is one of the hormones that will signal the thyroid to secrete its product. So this hormone, TRH, is responsible for your thyroid functioning when it does. Then you have glycoprotein. So glyco referring to glycogen, which is a short chain sugar molecule, and protein. So a glycoprotein, you have FSH and LH and TSH. So FSH and LH, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, these are hormones that affect people born female to help your ovaries create mature eggs and then release those eggs. In males, people born male, it is the hormone that is responsible for developing maturing sperm. TSH also has an effect on your thyroid. So TRH is responsible for the release of TSH. TSH is responsible for the release of T3 and T4. Most of your hormones produced in the body are non-steroid hormones. All right. So steroid hormones made from a cholesterol backbone. These are your sex hormones and your adrenal cortex hormones. And then most other hormones throughout the body are going to be non-steroid hormones. The actions of hormones. Hormones exert their effect by altering metabolic processes. So these hormones will either speed up the functioning of a cell or slow down the functioning of a cell. A hormone might change the activity of an enzyme necessary for synthesizing a particular substance or alter the rate at which a particular chemical is transported through a cell membrane. So what that means is the hormone might either slow down the making of a particular substance or speed up the making of a substance. Or it can slow down or speed up how quickly or how easily a substance crosses a cell membrane. So that is how a hormone will affect change on a cell. The number of receptors on a target cell might change at a given time. So you may have upregulation or you may have downregulation. Upregulation occurs when there is an increase in the number of receptors on a target cell, which often occurs as a response to a prolonged decrease in the level of hormone. So, the way upregulation works, you have a hormone floating around the body, right? Your body is accustomed to a certain level of this hormone floating around in the bloodstream, bathing the receptors of the target cells. If there is a reason for the body to decrease that level of hormone, which it does all the time because of changes in the internal or external environment, if for whatever reason that decrease in the hormone is prolonged, there is a long decrease of that particular hormone, then the way those target cells will respond is by increasing the number of receptors on its surface so that it is more likely to receive the signal from those hormones, because now you have more receptors looking for those hormones. This would be like if you have, let's say, a criminal that is running around the city, you're going to increase police presence so that now you have more eyes looking for that criminal. That would be upregulation of the number of police in a given area so that hopefully more eyes can see the one criminal. All right. Downregulation is the opposite. If you have a prolonged increase of a number of hormones, then you don't need as many receptors because there's so many hormones receiving the signal. You have so much hormone that is signaling all these cells that you don't need excess receptors. Actually, you may need a decrease in the number of receptors so that you don't keep getting stimulated by that increase in hormones. An example of this would be insulin resistance. That's not an example that you would know necessarily, but here's the deal. So when a person basically eats a lot of processed food, let's say lots of pasta and bread and candy and soda, lots of sugar and carbohydrates, you're going to have a steady increase in blood sugar, right? Because you're constantly eating lots of carbohydrates that break down to sugar and lots of sugar. So that is going to spike the sugar that is in your blood. That's going to increase the amount of sugar in your blood. In response, your body increases insulin. Insulin is the hormone that is released in order to take the sugar out of the blood and help bring it into the cells. If you constantly have high levels of sugar in the blood, which means you constantly have high levels of insulin in the blood, eventually the cells decide that it's tired of having all of this insulin bring all of this sugar into the cells. So then your body will downregulate, or your cells will downregulate or decrease the amount of receptors looking for insulin. So now you don't have as many sugar molecules going into cells. You don't have as many sugar molecules going into cells because you've decreased the amount of receptors, and that is that down regulation, because there's so much sugar causing so much insulin that the cells don't want as much sugar entering, so it decreases the amount of receptors. The number of receptors change in ways that maintain an appropriate response to that hormone level. If there's a constant decrease, then the body wants to increase it. If there's a constant increase, the body wants to decrease, all in hopes that it maintains homeostasis. actions of hormones. So here is the sequence of hormone action. The endocrine gland will receive a signal to secrete its hormone. All right, specifically now we're talking about steroid hormones. So an endocrine gland will get a signal from whatever signal it gets to secrete its hormone, its steroid hormone. It's going to secrete it directly into the bloodstream. The blood then takes that hormone and carries it throughout the body, because you remember you have blood vessels throughout the entirety of the body. That steroid hormone will eventually diffuse out of the bloodstream. It'll go to that target cell. It will it'll diffuse through the membrane of that target cell. So remember, we're talking about steroid hormones specifically. Steroid hormones are made up of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a type of lipid. Remember that the membranes of cell is a lipid bilayer, meaning it is two layers of lipids jammed together. So cholesterol will well, let me say the lipid bilayer of a cell loves the lipids, right? So lipids love lipids. So the steroid hormone then can diffuse through the membrane of the target cell and enter directly into the cytoplasm or the nucleus. Because it's a lipid, it is okay diffusing across that lipid bilayer. So once that steroid hormone is inside of the cell, it's either going to just stay in the cytoplasm, or it's going to migrate to the nucleus. That steroid hormone receptor complex then, because remember, the receptor is what is holding on to the hormone. That complex then will bind to the DNA inside of the nucleus and promote transcription of messenger RNA. That messenger RNA will then go back into the cytoplasm and cause protein synthesis. Synthesis means to make something. So in this case, that messenger RNA, that mRNA, will cause some protein to be synthesized. That newly synthesized protein then will produce that steroid hormone's specific effect. So basically, the endocrine gland, this is me repeating this process over. The endocrine gland will secrete its steroid hormone. That steroid hormone will be secreted directly into the bloodstream, where the bloodstream carries it throughout the body. Once it reaches a location where that target cell has the receptor for that particular hormone, that hormone will bind to that target cell receptor as that steroid hormone crosses the lipid bilayer, crosses that lipid bilayer because it's made up of a lipid, and that receptor lipid complex, so that receptor hormone complex will then enter, will bind to the DNA of that cell, of that target cell, and cause it to transcribe some messenger RNA. That messenger RNA will then enter back into the cytoplasm to direct the synthesis or the making of some protein. Whatever protein it is depends on the cell that is producing it. So then that new protein will do its job. And that's all because the steroid hormone was released and caused that cell to secrete, to make and secrete that product. So that is the action of a steroid hormone. We're going to end this video here and continue with the rest of the PowerPoint in the next video.